All right, welcome to the August Cygnal Pulse Pod. As you'll note, we got this massive, awesome new sign here. You'll probably want to look at it over me, not Mitch. Mitch is always better dressed than I, as evidenced here today as we record this Pulse Pod. Mitch is a new partner here, longtime pollster at Cygnal, and soon to be a married man. So you're not today as we record this, but when this launches, you will officially be married. So congrats to you and Morgan. Very exciting. So our August NVT poll, 1,500 likely midterm voters, which is what we do every month. The agenda for this is a couple sections. First, data versus dogma. So what do people believe? And then what does the data show that's different from that? Top 5 takeaways, and then our winners and losers lightning round. So, Mitch, let's start with what the media gets wrong on voters, because they're really good at that. How do they view redistricting through the lens of race? And we ask this because it's something that the Voting Rights Act mandates in a lot of states. The Supreme Court has peeled back pieces of the Voting Rights Act. And it's a lot of the conversation about right now, what you see where Trump is saying Texas should redistrict, these other states should redistrict, California and other gerrymandered states are on the left are trying to fight back. That's the dogma. What are you seeing in our data?
Yeah, and then couple that with the Supreme Court even hearing if they're going to allow any race-based districts at all. So that could change the map in a couple more states. And that's the perception, is that this is all done to harm people and that we should keep race in. But that is not how voters actually feel. 69% of voters overall say that we should not factor in race when we are making these congressional districts. And when you go through the actual race breakdown, 55% of Hispanics say we should not. 49% of blacks said we also should not. So when you're looking at it here, it's not like it's an outlier here. There's not, I know we talked about this briefly beforehand, but there's not a real large semblance of white guilt around this issue. People aren't saying that. Now, there could be a lot of factors there. It could be people thinking that race-based districts also go into what is currently gerrymandered. So there's some perception difference there. But overall, I mean, it clearly shows that this is not of the times. A lot of these things that were put in place that people thought had good intentions have kind of borne out to show that they did not.
Well, they probably did 60 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're not that America.
Yeah, they did not know what they were opening at that time. So that's kind of how it breaks down by the races. When you look at just the engagement gap on this, we also asked people how much they cared about this issue. Top line, independents said 51% of them care a lot, or on the extreme emotion scale. Democrats said 58%.
So they're obsessed.
Sounds about right. I mean, they're always a little bit race obsessed. Republicans only at 38%. Now, interesting, I'd like to know what that group thinks and if they want to see it more extreme. I don't really know where it goes from here. I mean, it seems like we have to go to a place where federally it's going to be mandated that you either have a independent commission that is setting these.
I don't know of any independent commissions that are actually independent, but that's a whole other conversation.
Illinois is an independent commission.
Yeah, and the most gerrymandered state in the entire country.
Yeah, so again, I don't really think there's any way around this. So I think, hey, if that's what California chooses to do, I mean, people make a choice to live in the states. I'm a big states' rights person. That's, I think, the most local form of government. It's the best form of government. So I say go for it. Let the states do what they want.
Well, another thing on this question of obsession over redistricting is the way that I took the question. I mean, we didn't ask it that way, but the fact that 58% of Democrats are saying they care extremely about redistricting. I guarantee, had we asked that question 5 years ago, that number would be 30s, maybe 40. They're just obsessed over it because Trump is talking about it now. But one thing that really sticks out to me as I look at the difference between Republicans and Democrats on this, how much do you care about redistricting, is it really sticks out to me that it's the diploma divide that we now live by. It's Democrats are highly educated, highly tuned in, pay attention to national broadcast news every single day. They're reading the newspapers. They're getting their news from all the liberal sources. And then you have the new Republican base, which is folks who just want to live their lives. They're not paying attention to this crap. They don't worry about it on a daily basis. But I think it's also a red flag for us going into the midterms, that you have an issue that's really inside baseball, if you want to think about how redistricting works. Like regular people don't understand that. This is a proxy to me of interest in winning political battles. And the Democrats right now are way more interested in winning political battles.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see how that plays out over time. Because the counterpoint to that always is, I mean, if you have two hyper gerrymandered large states in Illinois and California, Texas has not followed suit. It's a pretty normal map as it lays currently. You can assuage a lot of midterm concerns for the House if you do redraw this. So there's both to balance at the end of the day. All right, so next question we had on here, I really wanted this one on because it's something that I've been hearing a lot when I'm talking to young voters. So we asked, do they believe if the American dream is still alive? So we asked that to all respondents. What kind of stood out to you most from those?
It's really interesting because I always like to look at historical context on these too, because we've not asked this question before. So I wanted to see, where we landed in comparison to history. And if you go back, Wall Street Journal's been asking this question for a while. Go back to kind of like the early 2010s, and it was in the like mid 50s of yes, the American dream is achievable. It's alive. We show it upside down. Now, by the way, great idea for a question because in polling, one of the things we do when we write questions is we have theories of how they're going to turn out, what demographics we're going to need to look at. Sometimes that doesn't pan out. I would say this is one of those that panned out where we expected, it to be way worse with young people. Where I would say I was surprised is the fact that the 65 plus was not, strongly believing that the American dream is still alive because they have it. They own homes. They have money invested in stock. The whole $37 trillion debt we have for our nation funded their amazing American dream. Now we're paying the price as younger folks. But there was one group where it was net positive, and that was 55 to 64. And this is also kind of the group that I would say Trump, quote, radicalized over the last 3 times he's run. It probably, Gen X swung some of the hardest. Of course, younger voters, that's the big narrative. Younger voters swung right. I do think they're continuing to swing right. But if you look at kind of the trend from 2016 forward, it was these Gen X, very early boomers, but mostly Gen X. They're the most the only ones who are net positive optimistic on this. But then when you look at, under 30, only 30% say it's still alive. And that's, to me, the generation that's just been squashed by the other generations above it. One part that does stick out, and maybe this is because Trump is in charge. Like, I would love to have seen this question 2 years ago when Joe Biden was in the White House, because 69% of Republicans said that, yes, the American dream is alive. And so I wonder, I'd love your take on this, because I kind of look at this as like younger voters, that cynicism was the opening for Trump, this economic opportunity. You've got a whole bunch of people who believe that it is alive, and it's Republicans. And you've got 72% of Democrats saying, no, it's not alive. Of course, Trump plays into that piece, but like, do you think that that's a draw for younger voters to Republicans?
I think it's a draw to Donald Trump. I'm not sure if Republicans are able to capture that yet. That 55 to 64 group that you talked about, their kind of movement towards Trump and him radicalizing that group is almost kind of like a faux system here. Is, yeah, they understand what's going wrong, but they never had the adverse impacts of it. Yes, DEI was put in place while they were in the workforce, but they still went to colleges. They still got jobs. It's the young people who are not even getting those opportunities, who that's why they are much, much more upset.
Well, throw AI on top of that. What does a new law student need to do? Nothing. AI can do their job better than a new law student.
The country post-COVID is far different than it was in the teens. Again, it's a tough world out there. You can even do all the right things, but we're taking in all foreign students, so they're going to get the jobs because they're going to get a program visa where they're going to get paid less. So you're going to go to school, you're still going to be unemployed. Youth unemployment rate for men with a college degree is the same level for those without a college degree. It's a very bleak
which historically is not the case.
Yep, they have zero chance of affording a home in a large metro area. They're not starting families. Only 12% of men 12% of all people 30 or under own a home and have a child. That number was 55% 45 years ago. That kind of sums it up there. That is what the American dream was, and the youth just don't even feel they have the opportunity that their parents and grandparents did. On the party thing, these people came to Trump because Trump was saying that there was something wrong. This is the same group why I'm always sounding the alarm for people when they're saying, well, why are there Mamdanis of the world showing up on ballots? And like, that's not going to stop until some of these issues get sorted out. We're going to see people who probably even vote for both Trump and Mamdani. not because of any of the social issues or those things. It's someone saying, hey, the system's wrong and it's rigged against you. That's why you can't afford to live in New York City. That's why you can't do X, Y, and Z. So these people, they need Republicans to go sound more like them and appeal to those, just saying, hey, no, we're going to grow business overall. And it's the old style Republicanism. That's not going to keep any of these people at the party.
Well, I'm in the process of writing a book, hopefully done in the next couple months, about the role that emotions play in our decisions and how we see the world, and how that outcrops into policy and political decisions and political action or apathy. But one of the chapters is about distrust in institutions, and I think that's a lot of what you're saying right here. Is that these institutions that were built probably did serve a legitimate good purpose at one time, and the left co-opted them and turn them into things to enrich themselves and to advance their ideology. And then it leaves a wake of disaster behind it of folks who nothing works for them. Or at minimum, it feels nothing works, but in reality, probably does nothing work for them. And I think that's one of the big appeals for Donald Trump is that he is an institution destroyer. And anytime he gets pushback on that, I mean, not that he's looking to me or you for advice, but he needs to lean into destroying those institutions. And we'll talk about it a little bit later in the Fed when we talk about the Federal Reserve. But I think that's one of the huge draws of Donald Trump is that he's not just saying he's going to go after these institutions. He called it the swamp when he ran in 2016. He didn't really use that wording again this go around, if you recall. But that's really what it is destroying these institutions that no longer serve Americans as a whole, that only serve select Americans or even non-Americans better than it serves Americans. Let's go to our first takeaway section, and we're calling it the Democrat doldrums. What are you seeing in the data about kind of how voters view Trump, Republicans, Democrats? Like, what stuck out to you in that realm?
Yeah, on the Trump one, I kind of say this every time that I speak, is these numbers really aren't going to change that much throughout the presidency. I mean, I think Trump could go out there and save 500 children from a burning building, or go out there and shoot someone on the street, and these numbers are going to say roughly the same. And I kind of say that everywhere. So basing election strategy or campaign strategy off of Trump is never the correct idea when he's not on the ballot. There's nothing for you to gain from there. You have to become your own candidate, your own person. Democrats, this is, again, I think just a perception issue for them, is they have people there who are like, we don't know what the platform is. It's very be hard pressed to write out what is the Democratic platform today.
Besides be against Trump,
Yes.
or just be on the opposite side of whatever Trump said he's on the opposite.
Yeah, I mean,
side of.
go look at the Rust Belt. I mean, these blue dog Dems, typical union working households that have all flipped to Trump, like it's because they lost that group. They like to faux pretend that they are pro-worker when they weren't supporting workers there. So it's tough to have that there. I think that's the main focal point. And then two is you don't have a single person on the bench that is an appealing candidate to anyone. You have the Tim Walz's and Pete Buttigieg's of the world, or you have Kamala and AOC, where, I mean, we'll get to it briefly here, but AOC actually had a slightly better image than I thought. But that's your kind of platform there. At least Trump can carry the Republicans' net image with it there, when the Democrats don't have a platform or a figurehead currently.
Well, because we have Trump down 6 on favorability, which is essentially the same that it's been since he got into office. We have Republicans down 5 in image. So within the margin, basically the same number. And then we have Democrats upside down by 11. So more than double the negative image of Republicans. Among blue collar voters that you were talking about, they're upside down. Democrats are upside down by 19 there. And then to your point, they're less and less the party of the working class. When we did this huge research study for the book, we asked over 20 open-ended questions, and huge kudos to Mike Kemp for pouring through those and pulling out some bangers. It was over and over again people saying that they used to be this, they're no longer that. They focus on all these radical issues. They don't represent people like me. But then you see this thing. I want to talk a little bit about the midterms here. You see this huge motivation gap, because we asked how on a Likert scale, a verbal Likert scale, how motivated are you to participate in the midterm elections coming up? And 71% of Democrats said that they're extremely highly motivated. 66% of Republicans said the same. So now we've got this 5-point gap here. What stuck out to you on that?
Yeah, I think that is kind of a norm in a midterm year. People are always a little bit stronger on the against column than they are when their party is in power.
Especially with highly educated voters, which is now what Democrats are.
Yeah. What we found in 22, at least that my biggest takeaway from 22 was the gains that Republicans had. They gained in 22, but in the wrong areas. I think Democrats are going to experience a little bit of this for this midterm. Is again a lot of that heavy educated group. They don't really lie in swing districts. There's very few swing districts that are hyper educated and hyper high income earners. There's only a couple out there that are like that. So if you go and break this down, the people who are most motivated are people who live in areas that are blue regardless.
So what you were saying essentially about 22, correct me if this is wrong, that a lot of the Republican growth was in Florida and Texas and these other places in 22, which netted us no seats.
Well, it's actually a little different that we did better with our deep base in the rural areas, and then we actually got better in large, dense metro areas. But in the suburbs and the swing areas, we didn't do any better.
Just kind of net even
Yeah,
to
just kind
historical.
of net even, and that's why we didn't pick up anything when everyone was expecting that we would.
I looked at this from the perspective of top issue because I see top issues as a proxy of what people care about and they're emotionally driven by. And if you go back and look at some of our polling data towards the end of 24, you can see that the intensity of people who cared about inflation and economy or immigration and border or some of the issues you would say, well, those are right-leaning issues compared to abortion and threats to democracy and more left-leaning issues. And as I looked at this, if you said threats to democracy is your top issue, which obviously is a Democrat issue, 83% extremely motivated. If you said inflation and economy, only 56% extremely motivated. If you said immigration and border, only 72. Government waste and spending, which is another very right-leaning issue and like the third or fourth issue we've had for a while for the last several months, 68% extremely motivated. And so, I look at these topics and go, that's a little flag we should pay attention to. And it's also why I think that Trump should lean further into base issues. Because if you look back at 24, what actually juiced the final turnout? And it was the cultural issues. It was the cultural decline issues, which is how I view legal immigration and border. It wasn't the fact that I don't want that person with a different skin color here, as much as it was pushing back and saying, I don't want them destroying and like taking services that should be mine, taking housing that should be mine. Like it was a cultural decline issue at the end of the day. And then you have the whole transgendered, gender agenda being shoved down our kids' throats. You've got, men and women's sports, these other cultural issues. I actually think Republicans should lean further into those. If we're not going to get, if immigration and border is not going to be our driver, if inflation and economy is not going to drive our people out, then we got to find what those topics are. They're going to turn them out because elections aren't about persuasion. They're about persuasion to turn out. And we're now the party that has to figure out how to turn people out, which is historically not something we've had to do.
The one thing I've learned from my years with Trump is, again, to lean into anything that he is doing. So the Threats to Democracy group, I view it kind of as the group who had abortion as their top issue right around the overturning of
Now
Roe.
it's like 1%.
Yeah. And for this group, again, they're turned out there, but I think that what they're responding to and thinking are threats to democracy are really good with our base and can help us turn out. I think that this group, a lot of them view
like tearing down institutions.
Yes, and the mass deportation efforts, sending troops into cities. I think people like to see that. I think those are the cultural issues to hit on. I think leaning into all those things when everyone said the opposite of don't do that, like talk about be a moderate, do all these things is not the way to win, especially when Trump's not there. You have to drive these people, our base out. You have to get them to care about things, to still see issues that they want you to go out and fix. That's the only way to do it. And I think just Trump leaning into that is what's going to be helpful for the rest of the party. I think that they have to make that a focal point, and I think the members of Congress in these seats have to not run away from that.
Yeah, don't be scared. Don't hold town halls with purple-haired ladies, and don't be scared. So second takeaway here, interest rates. How dialed in are voters to the Federal Reserve or interest rates or that topic in general? What are you seeing in this data?
Yeah, so more than 3/4, about 78% of people are concerned about interest rates' impact on the economy. Now, again, why these questions are super interesting because you never really know what that means. Is it people think that it's like people not understanding like the the concept of interest rate, or everyone having a different view of what that means and that impact on the economy. So when we went a little bit deeper, 57% want to see rates lowered, thinking that will make things easier for them.
Are you
buying
shocked
homes.
by that number at all? Like high or low?
Yeah, I have my own pessimistic view of why I think it's a little bit lower. I think there's still a lot of gatekeeping here. I think older generations don't want to see these rates lowered. I think they like seeing what interest rates are going to be on homes. It makes a different group of people who are buying it. Institutions can still come in and buy it. They're keeping their price afloat. If interest rates go lower, that means more people are going to be building homes as well, and the market value is going to be going down. That's just me extrapolating a little bit further. But
Well, also your CD pays a better rate. I mean, if we're thinking about this in terms of generational warfare, which is where I think we are, because older voters have shifted left as protecting the things that have made them successful is more important to them. So they go to the Democratic Party. And younger voters are going to the right because they're destroying the institutions that have benefited the older folks and are stifling, choking out the younger generation's opportunity. Honestly, I was shocked that you didn't have 90% of people saying lower the interest rates.
well, why they didn't is because for some reason this is an institution and a psyop that we need to break. Right here is 46% say the main reason for rate hikes is to control inflation. That messaging has worked perfectly on everyone. People just
schools
say, yeah,
taught
sure.
it. And
Yeah, no, that's right. And so that one was kind of the most disconcerting to me. Interesting again. We're about to jump into this, but yeah, I had some interesting takeaways from the national, state, and personal economy.
yeah, before we get into that, as we're talking about institutions, we asked a question about how much do you trust the Federal Reserve? And I would bet that the bulk of people 2 years ago had no clue what the Federal Reserve was or what it did. Or, I mean, thank God for Hamilton the musical. That's probably the number one reason people actually know or have heard about the Federal Reserve, because Hamilton set that up. But 55% of Democrats had a great deal of trust in it. 41% of independents, only 28% of Republicans. Like, what a great proxy question for institutional trust. And only 34% of folks approve of how rates have been handled, which is another reason that I kind of expected that number of should we lower rates to be higher. One thing I will say is that as you're fighting battles like this, you don't ever want to make somebody the boogeyman that nobody knows who it is. We've got these bobbleheads here. Everybody watching probably could tell you who all four of these people are. And I just use this as an example in the sense that you never want to go after a person if the person is not the boogeyman or woman. Like Nancy Pelosi made a great boogie woman because everybody knew who she was and they didn't like her. If we tried to use that same strategy going after Hakeem Jeffries, people would say, "What's a Hakeem?" But I know a lot of Jeffries. And it's kind of the same thing on this fight against the Federal Reserve. Is I think Trump and the rest of the Republicans need to define what and who that is and why that's bad. And I get why we're trying to get rid of Powell, but at the same time, we asked, do you approve or disapprove of him going away? And the data was very split across all the response options, which 100% of the time, that means voters have zero clue about what you're asking them when you see very even distribution across all of the response options. So, let's jump to what you mentioned about how voters feel about the economy in different contexts. We ask, how do you perceive the U.S. economy? How do you perceive your state's economy? Then how do you perceive your personal economy? So what stuck out there to you in that third takeaway of this Pulse Pod?
Well, again, what all polling comes down to, I just like to think how people differentiate things in their mind. So when everyone thinks their state's economy is better than the federal economy, so it's interesting. Okay, what impacts those people's lives? So if people think that their state economy is better, okay, are those people who don't have a lot of money invested in the market? Like what is allowing them to think that? Because again, markets are still hitting all-time highs, so people in that sense have that. Okay, how much do they view inflation as coming from federal policy to state policy when they look at the price of gas or a price at the store? Whether they factor in states that have grocery taxes, whether all these things, it's interesting to figure out, because I've seen this when I've asked in states that have a lot of different taxes. When we ask people what tax do they feel the most, it is nowhere near what tax they are paying the most in. No one says income tax because they don't know it. It's already out of their paycheck. All these states that had a grocery tax or a gas tax, they feel that because they see it every single time they go to the store here. So when
Well, and especially property tax. I would say that's the
yes,
number one that I see that comes up in states that it matters.
yeah, and so 33% said fair for their state's economy, which is +4 compared to nationally. 25% said good for their state's economy. So again, just a slight bump, about 3 to 4% across the board. People viewed their state's economy as a little bit better, and then an additional, everyone thinks their personal economy is about 4 points better than that of their state. So again, you look at it every way that gets closer to them, they think it's better. Uh, whether that's perceived, whether that's true, whether that's not true. It's just unique that that's always the trend.
Well, and I like to combine response options too, and we have multiple ones. And so on the U.S. economy, 29% say it's excellent to good, 29% fair, 41% poor to terrible. And Republicans are saying 49% excellent to good. You know, this just shows you what power Trump derangement syndrome has, that Democrats would say 59% poor to terrible. But if we went and looked at the demographics of Democrats, especially their income, I guarantee they're doing better than most folks on an income perspective because they're more highly educated. It's the diploma divide. And then as you look at this, college educated voters drove the difference between national and personal economy the most. And then non-college educated voters were most likely to move from saying that the national economy was poor to terrible to theirs being fair. So, not all the way up to excellent or good, but at least fair. And so I think a lot of this is both economic, but it is, to your point, it's the perception piece. Because who's driving this national number being so bad? It's women under the age of 55. Who are women under the age of 55? Well, they believe 66% the country's headed in the wrong direction. Worst of any group. They're 35-58, which is D plus 23 on the generic ballot. They are negative 30 on Trump's image. So not a friendly group. This is, to me, when you look at that data point and then how they answered these other questions and then how they answered how the national economy is going, they're just saying that because Trump is president, not because they actually believe it or feel it as much. Now, I'm not negating that they do. I'm just saying that the bulk of it is Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, I get that. That is, again, the always funny part. And I think I just love the little notion. People always think that they're doing better financially, that their management of something is better. And I just find that one to be.
Totally agree. Let's talk tariffs now. We asked a lot of questions on this because you've got tons of news coming out now of how many billions of dollars a month that tariffs are bringing in, which is what Trump said would happen if he did this. We've got a ton more tariffs that just kicked in. We're not going to see those revenue numbers until next month for August. So in the series of questions that we asked, what stuck out to you about Trump and his handling of tariffs?
Yeah, I think this is, the Trump team knew this, that it would just take a little bit of time. Like the last time I did the podcast with you, I said that is just like, give them a breathing room to run with it, message it a little bit differently. But 53% are aware that tariffs have increased the government revenue. So I think that's on the right track to doing well. There's been zero actual blowback in people's pockets. I just saw Mercedes just announced their new pricing for 2026. And again, some of their vehicles are solely made in Europe, like not even manufactured or assembled here. And $300 increases, $400 increases, despite a 15% tariff. People aren't going to be feeling the impacts of these. The countries don't have a choice but to accept them. So 48% said Trump's tariff negotiations have been successful, again, higher than his approval rating. So that's good.
By a lot. So he's underwater by 6. He's +1 on his handling of tariffs. So a 7-point gap. That totally breaks the media narrative that these tariffs are hurting Trump's image. They're hurting Trump's electability, or not his electability, but they're hurting Republicans' electability in the midterm there. It's just fascinating when you look at, I looked at Democrats, 6% of Democrats are favorable of Trump, 16% say he's being successful in this.
This is one where it's just, you'd have to be one of those people who, regardless of what Trump does, you don't like him to not see this. When you even just hear, like, even us, like, not saying, oh, wow, that's what the tariff differential was between us and this country. No. That's just how any American's going to feel. So he's going to have as much leeway with that. They like seeing, it always does fall back to people always have a tendency to like a strong man. And seeing us go out there and be like, no, we're America. This is how we're going to handle tariff negotiations. That's obviously had a strong impact. The one group who does have a little bit of skepticism is that independent group. 14% oppose how he's handled it. 21% say that's been unsuccessful.
My theory there, and this goes back to my experience in 2022 in the midterms, where every swing seat that I was involved in, congressional, state legislative, even some of the statewide races we were doing, our independent numbers looked pretty good. We were either even or ahead with independents. The problem with independents in a lot of states is that's not actually a designation. Like there is no way to go pull somebody who registered as an independent in the bulk of states. It's not a thing. And even people who are registered as independent, unaffiliated, no party affiliation, a lot of them are getting registered on motor voter. So they got a driver's license and they got registered to vote and they didn't know it and they're stuck as that. So they're on a voter file, their phone number is there. I think what's happening here, and I give that backstory, is that when the 22 election actually happened and we did postmortems, we lost independence. But we didn't lose independence and polling was wrong. What happened is there were a bunch of people who were favorable of our Republican candidates who stayed home. We didn't close the deal with those folks. And the independents who did show up were not in our favor. And I look at something like this, the data point you just brought up, where we're upside down by, what'd you say, 16 points on this issue with independents. And I say, okay, well, that means there's a ton of independents that believe what we believe, and they're not currently engaged in planning to vote in the midterm more than anything else. And another question that we asked was, do you believe the U.S. is taking care of or gets a fair deal in trade deals? And 53% of voters believe that the U.S. is often taken advantage or gets less favorable outcomes. And only 25% believe our trade deals are generally fair. 10% said we get better trade deals than other countries. And I think that is why we're seeing these tariff numbers not be as horrible as the media says that they are, when you've got a majority of Americans who believe that we're getting the raw end of these trade deals historically, and this is rectifying those. Oh, and we get paid on top of that. Fifth takeaway here, let's jump in. MAHA, something that you hear a little bit of, probably not as much as we heard about during the election, but we asked an interesting question of, should EBT SNAP purchases be able to go towards junk food, sugary drinks, ultra-processed foods? What did you see there about this, make America healthy again argument?
Yeah, this one, I was super pumped to see this response. 61% said no, we should not allow people to buy those things with EBT. And what's so unique about Trump and why bringing RFK in, what was important, one, to winning the election with a certain group of people, but two is traditionally, this is not how Republicans would ever attack this issue. They would go at EBT itself and say we need to restructure that and start removing things from it.
Which translates to take it away from
correct,
people.
Which, again, is not wrong in notion, but it's the wrong way to go about it. It's, again, going to be viewed from that old school perspective that you're just going in there not caring. This here is, okay, again, something when people hear it, no, when you're seeing the videos that now go viral of people having thousands of dollars in food stamps and they're buying packs of Dasani and Skittles and all this stuff, people are like, absolutely not. Like, this is the starting point of how to go about the fraud and abuse that is factored in here. And going about it this way, because then you have people like, okay, yeah, even the ones who are in that dead set moderate group who don't want to remove EBT, but they're like, yeah, you're right. No, that we shouldn't be just promoting this behavior. It's just a great way to go about it. And so I was excited to see that. 53% of Democrats think that it should cover junk food.
Of course, they're going to be on the wrong side of a super popular issue.
Yeah, no.
Shocker.
They don't like seeing healthy people. That's not really their thing. They want you to be lethargic, sedentary. It's easy to control.
Yeah. Well, it makes them a bunch of money in the healthcare system too.
That's true.
And that's what I think that is not being discussed in this is, why are we not talking about the impact of those diets that we're funding? I mean, I remember a few years after I'd graduated college, I mean, I was one of those guys in the now 12% who was married, had a kid, owned a home back in, that was that 2010 timeframe or so. I remember talking to somebody I went to high school with who received EBT SNAP, but I honestly don't know the difference, but we'll just lump them in together. She had 3 kids. I had 2, so this has been 2012. She was getting $1,000 a month back then. This was 13 years ago. My wife and I were spending maybe $400 a month. Like, we were budgeting to be able to provide food for our family. And she's getting $1,000 a month for her 2 kids. And I was just blown away. And this is 13 years ago. And so I think there's so much more around this. I agree with the program. I think it should exist. I think it should provide healthy food for people who really need it when they need it, not for a lifetime. But I'm glad to see data that shows that people believe that this should not go to junk. It should go, if you're going to have it, put it towards healthy purposes. So let's close this episode of the Pulse Pod up here with our winners and losers lightning round. Mitch, who's your winner? Who's your loser from the data this month?
I mean, my two biggest were tariffs and Maha, which we already covered. But then that just, again, pulling back into why I'm super grateful for Donald Trump is these things are super unique. No one would have gone about these this way. They won't. Republicans had this poor tendency until Donald Trump of not wanting to upset the apple cart, not wanting to change things. And both of these were drastic changes that would need to be done and why Trump can continue to be successful.
So who's the loser?
I mean, on premise alone, the Fed, again, like you said, no one knows enough about Powell. I think we need to start telling the story of how the Fed was founded. I think that could start to maybe sway a little bit of opinion here, but that would be my biggest loser.
To some rap music like Hamilton, I guess, to make it very relatable. So my winner would be Republicans on redistricting. One, because it's inside baseball. Most people don't care. You're going to tick off Democrats about it anyways. Regular people aren't. They believe they're all rigged anyway, so who cares? But they definitely don't want it done by race. I mean, almost 70% saying don't do it by race. And then loser would be Democrats with blue collar voters. I mean, it's like blue collar voters are trying to tell them, this is what I want to hear from you. This is where I am. And Democrats are like, that's great. Have you tried something new with LGBTQA plus I3? I don't know what the letters are now, but like, they don't even listen.
Have you tried getting screamed at by a woman again? How about this? We're going to keep doing that instead.
It is not working. It is not working at all. So thank you for tuning in to the Pulse Pod this month. Trump's image is steady. Don't believe what the media says. Voters are definitely with Republicans on the key issues. Again, counter to what the media says. And Democrats really have some trouble, but also Republicans have some things that they need to focus on as it relates to turnout and issues that they can use to drive that. So, Mitch, thanks for being here. Look forward to being at your wedding in a few days. That, of course, you'll be married after this is done. And then we'll be back to you in September with new insights. So follow us on X or other social at CYGNAL or on our website, cygn.al.